Once you have Scrutinizer deployed, the virtual machine is set up with the IP address for your network. There's a few things that we're going to want to do with the system now that we are logged in for the first time. So the first step with a fresh Scrutinizer deployment is going to be applying a new license key. So what we'll need to do is once you're logged in, we'll navigate to the administrative page. We're going to go under Plixer and Scrutinizer licensing. From the licensing page, what you'll need to do is take the machine ID and send that to Plixer's support, where we will generate a new license key for you. Once we have the license key back, we will take the section here and replace it with the new license key and click Save. This process is going to restart the collector service. That's okay. Once the page comes back, we'll see we are licensed for Plixer One Enterprise. We have a valid license key. We have the length of time that our license key is going to expire. It's like 156 days. The number of servers, reporters, and exporters that are part of that license key. And then we also have some details about the number of servers deployed in the cluster, as well as the enabled exporters. So now that the system is licensed, we're going to want to go through the initial configuration steps inside of Scrutinizer. If we navigate to the dashboard, we have a built-in dashboard for the welcome dashboard. On this dashboard, we have a gadget called configuration checklist. We'll see that the product is currently 16% configured. If we select that gadget, it's going to bring us to the configuration status page. The configurations page will show you the different areas of the product that should be configured so you can get the most out of the data that the system is collecting. There are a multitude of tasks inside of this configuration status. There are a few that I'm going to focus on first. The first one that I want to do is going to be IP groups. IP groups, if we select any one of the configurations inside of this checklist, it's going to give us a little bit of detail about that particular task, whether or not it is configured, the number of items that we have configured. This also gives you a link to our documentation page. We select this link here, we'll open up documentation filtered on the IP groups configurations. And then the user status for this task inside of the configuration status. So I could come in and I could accept this task and consider it complete without actually configuring anything in the IP groups. But I'd like to set up a few of these. So let's go to the administrative window. If I click on the ellipses in the top right-hand corner, opens up the admin menu. I'm going to go down to definitions and IP groups. Scrutinizer has a set of built-in IP groups that are used in various areas of the product. IP groups are used not only to help limit the data that's shown in certain types of reports, but it also helps to exclude certain IP addresses from the flow analytic algorithms that run to find anomalous traffic. If I were to come into the DNS servers default group, I can define the DNS servers that run in our network. So what I'll do is I'll come into the rules section. I'm going to add a new rule, which will be an IP address for 10.1.5.1 is a DNS server that runs in our network. So I'm going to add that to the DNS servers IP group. There is one other that I want to add. Now that I have defined two different IPs that are part of the DNS servers IP group, these IP addresses will automatically be excluded from triggering alarms based around DNS traffic. I can use the other IP groups to define things like our SNMP pollers. I can add a new rule. I'm going to add the rule for an IP address. And click add, which is going to add that rule to that group. So you see in the background here, I have added definitions to the SNMP pollers IP group and the DNS servers IP group. You can also define your own IP groups. What I'll do in the top right-hand corner, I'll click the plus sign. I'm going to create a new IP group. This one will be called support. This is an internal group, meaning all of the IP addresses in this group are considered internal. Once I save that, I now have the ability to add new rules. Instead of adding a single IP address, I'm going to add in a subnet, so an IP subnet to say that 10.42.0.0. I'm going to add the net mask of /16. Click add. Now, all IPs that we see in reports will be tagged as part of the support IP group if it falls inside of that subnet rule. I'm going to define one more IP group. We're going to name this sales. This is also going to be considered an internal IP group. And this will be a subnet that is 10.60.0.0, and the net mask will be also a /16. Now that I have updated a few of the built-in IP groups and created a couple of groups of my own, I could go back and look at my dashboard, and you'll see that the configuration checklist went from 16% to 24%. If I look at this, at the list of the configuration status for each of these, you'll see that I now have a green check mark saying that the IP groups is configured. The next setting that I'm going to configure will be data history. Data history is telling the system how long do I want to store information or flow data in the database. How long do I want to store that information for? Again, I can click on data history and see that this is not configured. I have not configured any items inside of the data history tab. And then I also still have the link to the documentation page for data history. So to configure data history, I'm going to go to the admin menu. I'm going to go under settings and data history. Scrutinizer stores historical data based on averages. It starts with the historical flow 1 minute average. This is the raw data being sent by your exporters. When we configure an exporter to send flow data, we always configure the active flow timeout set to 60 seconds. By default, Scrutinizer is going to store that 1 minute data for a total of 48 hours. I can extend this amount of time by just changing this number. Maybe we want 7 days worth of 1 minute data. I'll set that to 168 hours. When Scrutinizer has 5 1-minute data points, it will then take that information. It will rank all of the conversations from the largest conversation to the smallest, and then it will roll up the top 1,000 conversations into a 5-minute average. And then that 5-minute average is then stored in the database for X amount of time. In this case, we have 168 hours or 7 days of 5-minute data. We do the same thing from 5-minute to 30-minute. We take 6 5-minute data points. We rank all the conversations from largest to smallest. We use the top 1,000 conversations and create a 30-minute average. The 30-minute average is based off of days. I can see this by hovering over the eye icon next to the 30-minute average section, and it will tell me that this will hold data for a number of days. So in this case, we have 30 days of 30-minute averages. If I want to get a better idea of the amount of disk space my historical data will take, we have a feature in 19.6 that will help you calculate the amount of disk space based on the amount of data you're trying to store. When we're on the data history tab, we can go to the calculator icon in the top right. If we select that icon, it's going to bring out this tray. This will give us the ability to see the current settings based off of what we have set in our averages on the side here. We have a test section where you could change these values and then get an idea of how much disk space that's going to take. So in this case, I have 168 hours of 1-minute data. This first table will show me the predicted hard drive utilization based off of the current settings in this top section. We'll see for 168 hours of 1M data, we'll take up 3 gigs of space based on the data that that's being collected by the system now. If I look at the current hard drive utilization, this tells me how much disk space is taken up by the data history that I have stored on the system currently. Right now I have 721 megabytes of 1 minute data, and I have a total amount of disk space of 61 gigabytes. I could take this number and stretch it out to, let's say 300 hours of 1 minute data. You'll see that there is now purple text in my predicted table that went from 3 gigs of 1 minute data to 5 gigs. I could go even further and say 3,000 hours of 1 minute data is going to take up 48 gigs in that 1 minute data history setting. This will show me that the total amount of disk used on the system will be 67 gigabytes. I could play around with these numbers and come up with a set that makes sense for the amount of history that I personally want to store and the amount of data that the disk is available. Maybe I want to stretch these out to 60 days worth of 30-minute data. I want to do the same thing for the 2-hour data. And then I can take the last setting of the 12-hour data and stretch that. I can do the same thing for the 12-hour data and say this is in weeks. So let's say 52 weeks will be enough for my 1 year worth of data. I can then save that with the check mark, and that's going to update the values in the settings page under data history. Now that we've configured data history, you'll see that we again changed our configuration checklist, went from 25% to 28% configured. We can select that again. We'll go in and we'll see what's next on the list of things that should be configured. The next setting that I want to change is around defined applications. Scrutinizer does define applications based off of port numbers for the well-known ports. Think of the port numbers like 22 is going to be defined as SSH traffic, or port 443 will be defined as HTTPS traffic. If I wanted to get a little bit more granular with the applications that we have running in our network, we have the ability to define those applications. I'm going to navigate back to the admin menu. I'm going to go under definitions and then applications. Now that we're on the applications page, I'm going to add a new application. I'm going to name this application Scrutinizer. When I add rules, when Scrutinizer, the system, sees traffic based on an IP address and a port number, it will automatically tag that traffic as the specific defined application. So in our case, we have Scrutinizer is running on 10.42.16.150. I'm going to add that as a rule. And then I'm going to add the port number of 443. Now I have 2 rules assigned to this application to say if Scrutinizer sees traffic that is destined for 10.42.16.150 and the port number in use is 443, we will automatically define that as Scrutinizer traffic in the reporting engine. So let's click save, and now we have our application defined. I'm going to do one more. This one is PRTG. We have also PRTG is running in our network. The IP address is 10.1.70.2. I'm going to add that rule, and the port number is 443. Now that I have the rules applied, I'm going to click save, and that application is now defined. So now when I'm viewing traffic inside of reporting, instead of seeing traffic destined for 10.42.16.150 and the application is tagged as HTTPS, it will actually be tagged as Scrutinizer traffic. Now that we have our applications defined, I'm going to exit this classic view. I'm going to navigate back to the dashboard tab to view our configuration checklist. Now that applications are defined, we went from 28% to 32% configured. Checking back to our configuration status, we see that we are at 32% configured, and there are still a few other tasks that need to be completed inside of the system, like configuring custom dashboards, enabling our machine learning engine, configuring mapping, etc. As part of configuration for the initial setup of the Scrutinizer system, I've already configured my first few exporters to be sending data to the system, but I want to start getting alerts and data out of the system when specific traffic patterns are met. This is done in a few different ways, like flow analytics or report thresholds. The next step for the initial configuration is going to be defining which exporters are part of which security group. Security groups are used by Flow Analytics to automatically add specific types of exporters to the specific algorithms that the data would be useful from. For instance, we'd want to use edge devices when triggering things like DDoS alarms. We'd also not want to use our edge devices to trigger things like scanning algorithms. So what we can do is use our security groups to define which exporters should be allocated to certain groups or security groups inside of the system. So I'll go to the admin menu. I'm going to go under Alarm Monitor, Security Group. Scrutinizer has a few built-in security groups where you can automatically define which exporters should be used for which algorithms. As you can see in this table, we don't have any exporters added to each of these groups yet, but we do have certain algorithms are added for core devices, edge devices, and defender probes. So what I'm going to do to automatically add all of the core devices to the 39 algorithms that are specific to core type devices, I would then want to edit the core exporters. I want to go under active exporters, and then I want to add in all of the devices that are considered to be core. So I'll go through this checklist. I'm going to go through and I'm going to select each one of the devices that I know to be core devices and click add. Now you'll see I now have 4 devices that are part of the core exporter group, and they are automatically added to the 39 algorithms specific for that group. I'll do the same thing for my edge devices. I'm going to add just the ones that I know to be on the edge. Oh, not that one. And now they are added. What we can do, we can also view from the edge exporters. You can also see under the algorithm section that these are all of the algorithms built into Scrutinizer by default that want to view the traffic or use the traffic being sent by your edge devices. The next configuration that I want to set is going to be SNMP polling of my exporters. If I view the exporters from the Explore tab, you'll see I have all of the different exporters currently sending data to the system. And you'll notice that they're all IP addresses. This is because I have yet to configure Scrutinizer to poll these devices using SNMP to pull in information about host names, interface descriptions, and interface speeds. Under the admin menu, I'm going to do a search for SNMP, and this will show me all of the different configuration pages that are specific to SNMP. I'm going to choose SNMP credentials. By default, there is a default SNMP credential. This one is not going to be used. I'm going to add a new one. We're going to call this Plixer SNMP. The description is going to be default Plixer SNMP string. I'm going to choose the credential type as SNMP v2c, the community string. Then I'm going to use the defaults for the rest of the configurations and click Save. Once you've configured your SNMP string, This will give you the option to set all of your exporters into a discover mode. Discover mode is when Scrutinizer will try all of the different defined SNMP credentials you have in the system against all of your exporters until it finds one that gets a response. This is an easy way for you to come into this page, enable 5, 6, 7 different SNMP credentials that all of your exporters would use. We would use the yes option to set all exporters to discover mode, and then Scrutinizer will try each one until it finds the correct credential for each of your exporters. In this case, I'm going to select yes. We'll click save. Oh, we've already saved, so we will close that page. And now the next time Scrutinizer does its scheduled task of pulling SNMP, it will try this credential against all exporters, and then we will see the usage section update.